Welcome to the Trail Running Briefing, the podcast for trail runners who want to understand their training and run better. Each week, one clear idea to help you train smarter, stay durable, and perform when it matters. Episode 30. The Plateau Problem. Why ultrarunners stop improving and how to move forward. Have you ever had a training block where you are doing everything right? Running consistently, adding kilometers, climbing more hills, ticking off the long runs, yet somehow you are not getting any better. Your pace is the same. Your legs feel flat. The long runs feel harder, not easier. So the obvious answer seems to be do more mileage, more climb, another hard session. But that may be the wrong response. A plateau is not always a sign that you are under training. Sometimes it means that fatigue is hiding the fitness you are built. Progress comes from the relationship between training stress and adaptation, not from training stress alone. Think of training as a loop. First, you give the body a signal. Then, you give it enough resources and recovery to absorb that signal. And finally, the adaptation needs to be relevant to what you are actually trying to do. We need to be very sport specific as possible. If any part of that loop breaks down, you can train very hard and still stop moving forward. Let's now discuss where the problems could come up from. The first problem can be the signal itself. The body is incredibly good at adapting. That is exactly what training is designed to achieve. But once a particular stimulus becomes familiar, repeatedly giving the body essentially the same challenge produces diminishing returns. In other words, if every week contains the same mileage, the same hills, the same long run, and roughly the same intensity, eventually you become very good at tolerating that workload. You may maintain fitness, but there is less reason for the body to change. That doesn't mean constantly adding more kilometers. Progression can come from many directions. Slightly more volume, a more purposeful quality session, more climbing, more technical terrain, longer sustained climbs, progressive downhills exposure, or longer race-specific work. The important word here is purposeful. Change something because it targets a limitation. Not simply because you want to train, not because you want the training week to look harder. The second problem is that the training signal may be getting buried underneath fatigue. Training temporarily makes us worse before it makes us better. We create stress, recover from that stress, and hopefully come back more capable. But if the next big stress repeatedly arrives before we have absorbed the previous one, fatigue can accumulate faster than we can express that adaptation. Then something dangerous happens psychologically. The runner feels slower and assumes fitness is disappearing. So they train harder. The next session is poor. So they add more training, more fatigue, another poor session. And suddenly, the attempt to escape the plateau is actually reinforcing it. Intensity distribution matters here too. There isn't one universally superior model for every endurance athlete, but both observational and intervention research show successful endurance programs generally accumulate a large proportion of training at low intensity alongside a much smaller amount of purposeful harder work. The problem for many runners is what I call the grey zone trap. Easy days gradually become moderately hard. Hard days are then performed on tired legs and lose their quality. You end up working fairly hard almost every day without being fresh enough to train properly hard when it actually matters. The third problem is recovery, and recovery includes fuel. You can have a beautifully designed training program and still fail to adapt properly if your body doesn't have enough energy available to support it. Low energy availability is associated with negative health and performance consequences, and recent evidence also links it with poorer training response and endurance performance. More training while chronically under fuel is therefore not better training. And then there is something especially important for ultrarunners. You cannot only train the engine. VO2 max, threshold, and aerobic capacity matter. But as the race becomes longer, another question becomes increasingly important. How much of that fitness can you still use after many hours? That is durability. Can you maintain your movement, running economy, muscular function, and ability to produce force as fatigue accumulates? Recent ultramarathon research has placed considerable emphasis on muscle damage and associated fatigue as important constraints in long ultras. Strength training also has good evidence for improving running economy, while recent research suggests regular long runs and greater training volume may contribute to better durability during prolonged running. There can also be a specificity problem. Fitness is not completely transferable. You can improve your threshold pace on flat roads and still plateau in mountain ultras if your race requires sustained climbing, technical descending, and hours of eccentric loading. Mountain ultramarathons create very specific psychological and biomechanical demands, particularly during prolonged downhill running. So, as the race approaches, your training should increasingly prepare you for the things most likely to limit you on race day. That brings us back to the plateau. Instead of asking, how can I do more? Ask, which part of the adaptation process is no longer working? That is a much more useful question. How do you break the plateau? The first thing I will do is resist the temptation to immediately add mileage. Ask whether you are actually experiencing a plateau or simply experiencing fatigue. One disappointing week is in a plateau. Look for a pattern. Are similar sessions repeatedly becoming harder? Is your normal easy pace costing more effort? Are you carrying persistent heaviness or soreness? Has motivation dropped? Do you repeatedly feel as if you can't produce the quality you normally can? Several things suggest accumulated fatigue. Reducing the training load may move you forward faster than adding another session. Then look at the stimulus. Ask yourself, what has actually changed in my training over the last month or two? If the answer is not much, choose one variable to progress. Not everything at once, only one variable. You might increase climbing. You might make one threshold or uphill session more purposeful. You might extend the long run. You could introduce more technical terrain, or perhaps you need progressive downhill conditioning. Give your body one clear new problem to solve. At the same time, protect your easy running. Yes, easy running should help you accumulate aerobic volume while keeping the cost manageable. It doesn't need to become another daily test of fitness. Save your freshness and concentration for sessions that have a specific purpose. Then look beyond running volume. If your aerobic fitness is strong but your legs repeatedly fall apart late in ultras, more intervals may not address your real limit. Consistent strength training, progressive downhill conditioning, and long duration running may be more useful. For an ultra runner, being fast when fresh is only one part of the equation. You need to remain capable after 5, 10, 15 or 20 hours. That is why durability deserves to be trained deliberately. Next, audit your fueling. Are you actually eating enough to support the amount of training you're asking your body to absorb? Are your important sessions properly fueled? Are you replacing enough energy afterwards? Remember, the workout provides the stimulus. You still need the resources to build the adaptation. And finally, make recovery weeks proactive rather than emergency measures. Don't always wait until your body forces you to back off. Sometimes reducing the training load allows accumulated fatigue to fall, and suddenly the fitness you thought you lost becomes visible again. So when progress stalls, don't add everything. Diagnose first. Is the problem the stimulus? Is accumulated fatigue preventing you from absorbing it? Are you underfueling? Are you missing strength and durability? Or has your training simply stopped reflecting the specific demands of the race you are preparing for? Find the weakest part of the equation. Change one thing. Then give that change enough time to work. To conclude, a plateau is frustrating because it feels as though all the work has stopped producing results. But a plateau can also be useful information. It is your training telling you that the current equation needs to change. Remember this. Training is not about collecting kilometers. Training is about creating adaptation. Sometimes that requires a bigger stimulus. Sometimes it requires more recovery. Sometimes it requires better fueling, more strength, or training that looks much more like the race you're preparing for. So the next time progress stalls, resist the instinct to simply suffer more. Instead, ask yourself, what does my body need to adapt next? That's today's trail running briefing. Understand your training, apply it on the trail, and run better.